Hello, welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. It's another Q&A today. Thanks very much for sending in all your questions. Got loads of them, really, some really good ones for this video. More behind the scenesy kind of stuff. So let's crack straight on with a question from Chumstew73. He says, thanks for the question by the way, what's the worst stroke most embarrassing stroke awkward crash stroke incident you've had while on a manufacturer's test, and how was it dealt with? Thinking of Hogan's famous Fireblade wheelie. Well, yeah, that refers to John Hogan, formerly of Superbike magazine, now a PR gentleman at Norton, and he flipped a 2020 Fireblade down the front straight at Qatar behind a tracking photo car. So it wasn't high speed or anything, it was just a low speed wheelie. I mean, I can see how that would have happened because as the name implies, that Fireblade is quite a fiery beast. Unfortunately, there's no pictures because even though the photographers in the back of the car caught the crash, they were never allowed to be released. There's also another famous Fireblade wheelie flip, which was my first major launch, which was the 04 Fireblade, which happened at the end of 03 in Arizona. And that time it was Alan Dowd's, also of Superbike magazine actually at the time, and we were doing wheelies down the start finish straight, and I just heard this crash and bang, and it was Alan flipped it. At first I thought it was Sonsky. Remember Sonsky, the old Star Boys guy that did work at Superbike as well, used to do these big 12 o'clock wheelies. Well, Alan did a 12 o'clock wheelie, and it went to 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Ended up flipping it. But Paul Barshan, fantastic photographer, got the shot, and I think that made it out into the wild and people saw that as well. So, I mean, generally with the Brits, I mean, in that original Fireblade shot, we were told there was a Honda PR guy called Christoph, and we used to call him Pissed Off Christoph, because he had a short fuse, and I think that wheelie pushed him over the edge. So he stopped all of us lot. He stopped our go of having wheelies, so we couldn't do any, unfortunately. To be honest, the Brits, since I started 2002, haven't got a bad record when it comes to crashing on launches. Not like kind of the 90s, I suppose, when it was a bit of a crash fest, when, you know, fast bikes was at its pomp. And, you know, even the MCM road testers, people like Chris Moss, Andy Ibbott of the day, they didn't mind mucking about. But I think the Brits are relatively well behaved now. There's a few little slip-offs here and there, but nothing that I can think of that's blatant. But I haven't crashed on a launch apart from once, and that was beginning of 2000, end of 2010, that's right, at Jerez on the Aprilia RSV for APRC Max Biaggi limited edition. So I suppose it was their first RSV4 with electronics package, because the first one, the 09 bike, didn't have any electronics apart from maybe rider modes, but the APRC had the full traction, wheelie control and everything. And I was going around Jerez, it was towards the end of the day, and I lost the front at turn, I never know what the turns are, but it's towards the end of the lap. It's after a fast left-hander where all the MotoGP riders go sideways, and then there's a tight right, and then there's another two fast rights after that. We'll come back from that. It's the first tight right, and I just held on to the brakes for too long and lost the front. And it was embarrassing because at launches you don't really have a lot of marshals there, so there was no one to help pick the bike up. So they carried on the session, and I basically was just stood there in my Christmas tree leathers next to a bike on its side, while everyone else was riding round, no doubt, calling me all the names under the sun. But apart from that, I haven't really crashed. To be honest, when we're on tests, and especially track tests, you're not riding flat out anyway. Well, I'm not. I'm kind of maybe 80%, just because there's so many other things on your mind. You know, you're thinking about the bike, you're thinking about what you're going to say, you're thinking about the deadlines, you're thinking about what the photographers are, you're thinking about not getting close to any other riders because you don't want any other riders in your shot. So it's not really a natural way of riding on launches. Your head's full of other stuff, unfortunately, which is a shame. You don't really get to let loose and enjoy it like I would when I'm racing or whatever. So, you know, I keep it well within myself. But yeah, you never know. The next one might be around the corner though. Thanks very much for your question. Okay, the next one is from Bikadelic. That's a good name. Thanks for the question. And this refers to something I was talking about in my previous video about tips I give people at the Ron Haslam Race School. And one of them was about gear choice and your revs in the middle of the corner. So you said being in a low gear increases the risk of a high side. Why? How do I ask you these questions for these videos? Well, there you go. Just write in the comments basically. So what I actually said was being in a lazy gear with low revs increases the risk of a high side on the track. So one of the things that is quite common for a road rider at the Haslam School when you go onto a track is that people use high gears and low revs, because that's what you do on the road, because you want the bike to be nice and smooth, nice and calm, and the bikes are easy to ride when they're docile like that. When you want to go fast around a racetrack, you've got to do the absolute polar opposite, which feels quite aggressive, which feels quite sort of damaging to the bikes almost. So these are the reasons. So that advice is shamelessly stolen from Ron Haslam and also Simon Crafar, both of whom have raced 500 Grand Prix bikes. And Simon Crafar said to me once, when he was developing the Moto Voodoo riding kind of manual, if you like, that he did in 2011, Simon Crafar said that when he joined 500 Grand Prix, Mick Doohan gave him a valuable piece of advice, and it was to say that you need to keep the revs up really high in the middle of the corner, or else on a 500, if the tyre spins when you're at low revs, it's very hard to catch because you haven't got that immediate throttle connection. The throttle connection's a little bit lazy, and before you've had time to shut the throttle and sort it out, the tyre starts to spin up and it has to climb through all of those revs. It spools right up to the red line. It's got all this captured energy, and then you let off, and then it grips, and then it flings you to the moon. So that's one thing 500 riders used to do to stay safe. They used to go through the corners at high revs. So the advantage of that is that if the tyres do slide, then you've got a better throttle connection. And then if it really does spin, you haven't got many revs left to fizzle out before it hits the limiter. And it's kind of an inbuilt traction control, really. And the same applies really to track riding on any bike. You need to be in a lowish gear going into a corner. You need the engine braking. You need the throttle connection. You need maximum acceleration out of a corner, which you don't do if you've got lazy gears and low revs. You just don't come out the corners very fast, and it's much, much safer. And the bike's less likely, like a super bike, is less likely to wheelie if it's already revving, because it's past peak torque. It's that torque, the big lump of torque at lower revs, that makes the bike wheelie. So it's just win, 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 win riding in that way. The only disadvantage is for a road rider, it sounds and feels really, really aggressive. In actual fact, on the Haslam School bikes, they just had road gearing. And you'd actually use quite low gears around the track. You'd use first gear for Melbourne Loop, You'd use first or second for Goddards. You'd use second for Redgate. You'd use third or fourth going down Craners. You'd be back to second for Old Hairpin. You'd be third or fourth coming up to Schwantz. Second for McLean's. Second for Coppice. Second for Foggy S's. So yeah, you're keeping the bike on the boil. So yeah, that's the way we would sort of teach somebody to ride safer around the track, and it's much safer, it's much faster, it's much easier. And you know, when you go back to sort of the old way, if you get the hang of this, being in a lazy gear just feels really pedestrian. It's not the way you ride on the road, but it's the way we taught people on the track how to ride. So there you go. I also use that approach when I'm wheeling. So you know, people go through the gears, they're really good wheelies, but I tend to stay in quite low gears and then use the rev limiter as kind of a wheelie control. So I'll be wheeling and going in second gear. And it's kind of, it stops you flipping. Easier said than done, I know, but yeah, great question. Thank you very much. Next is from Andy Stainforth. Oh, this is on the same kind of note really. Needsy, do you do one-to-one track tuition? Well, obviously I did when I worked at the Haslam School. I used to do their elite class, which was one-to-one on fire blades with students, with clients, customers, and they're all data logged. I mean, I really, really miss it. Since the Haslam School's closed, I haven't been able to do any one-to-one track tuition in that way, because if I was to do a track day on a bike with somebody, you know, I think on a racetrack, if you're not going your proper pace, something bad's going to happen. So say if you just did a track day with your mate and you're not the same pace, but you're just riding with each other, there's a danger that you're going to get tangled up with other riders, or because you're not absolutely concentrating 100%, you might make a mistake. So I would never do one-to-one track tuition at a track day, you know, and also you'd need a bib, some kind of instructor's bib, and obviously track days have got their own instructors as well, which are really, really good. You've also got race schools. You've got the Whittam School, you've got the Silverstone School with Ducati. There's lots of places you can go, but I have done one-to-one track tuition in my spare time as a hobby with some people, but I don't actually go on track with them. So for example, last year I went to Snetterton with a chap called John Rothman. Now this only kind of works with novice and intermediate level riders. I think once you get up to fast group, middle, top of fast group, you need to get on track with somebody because they're that quick, they kind of know what the score is, and obviously races. But John Rothman would probably be best described as a medium group track day rider, very, very fast road rider, faster than I'd ever want to go. And he had a BMW S1000RR. And what we did was just go through the track day, everything from when we get in there. You know, I was helping him with tyre warmers, I helped him with suspension settings, just getting a good base setting, with electronic settings. I know the S1000RR really well from racing, so I was able to advise on electronic settings and just get the bike in a place where, you know, you didn't have to worry about the bike anymore. And then session by session, we would basically go through what I used to talk about at the Haslam School, and you know, road-based track day riders tend to follow the same route. So it's all about body position. Also used to go out and spot them on the track as well, just to give them a bit of guidance. Body position, gear selection, talking about, you know, keeping the bike revving like I did before. Lines, off throttle turning, you know, all these little tips and tricks. And we managed to go something like, I think it was 7 seconds a lap faster by the end of the day. And to be honest, I would have got the same results if I'd have been on track with John. So there is actually a lot to be gained by just being with somebody at a track day and just being there to give advice and, you know, the fundamentals of track riding, which you can also see on an MCN video that we did a couple of years ago at Anglesey, where I took one of our web chaps, Gareth, and you know, he's a brand new novice on a couple of Ducatis, and went through similar things just to get him up to speed. And then last year he spent all year doing track days on an R7, and when you look at pictures of him, he looks really good. He looks like a racer. So he took everything on board. So so in a word, yeah, I do one-to-one track tuition in my spare time, but yeah, I don't actually go on track. I'm just there in the pits. But thanks for the question. Next is, right, so this is from Creed M. Hello, mate. So wow, what an experience to look back on. So he's talking there about the racer test that we did when we used to ride a lot of factory race bikes, MotoGP bikes, World Superbikes, BSB bikes, World Endurance, Supersport, everything in between. He talks about the fact we're only ever given 5 laps, and you say, were you ever tempted to say what the hell and go for another? Enjoy hearing your perspective, best. Well, thank you very much. So yeah, on a lot of these racer tests, you're only given a handful of laps. The first thing is remembering how many laps you've done, because once you come out the pits and you go across the line for the first time, you think to yourself, was that 1 lap, or is this the start of the first lap? Well, I do anyway. I was immediately confused, but luckily they hang out a pit board so you can see when to come in. On the MotoGP bikes, some of them we got 5 laps, but they include your out lap and your in lap, so it's basically 3 flying laps. Ever tempted to do more? Absolutely, definitely, but you know, those MotoGP things, the schedules are so tight. If you took another lap yourself, you'd be taking it off someone else, which wouldn't be very fair. One of the ones I remember, we went to Aragon to ride Max Biaggi's championship winning Aprilia, which must have been something like 2012, something like that. And we were given 3 laps, an out, a flyer and a back in again, which is hardly any time, is it? And we didn't actually ride his bike in the end. We rode Eugene Laverty's bike, his teammates, with Biaggi's fairings on. But that suited me because Laverty's bigger than Max and I could fit on his bike, and Laverty uses race shift, which I prefer on track, and Biaggi uses road shift. So yeah, we didn't get a lot of time on that at all. And Aragon, it was kind of early in the year, and it's right up in the mountains in Spain, and it gets really cold, and it's an anti-clockwise track as well, and it's very easy to forget on an anti-clockwise track that your right side of the tyre isn't warm to begin with, because most tracks are clockwise and your rights are always warm. And I had a few eye-opening slides, shall we say, just through cold tyres. Yeah, but sometimes you get given all the laps in the world. I know we've ridden some bikes through Paget's, with Clive Paget's with us, who's the most generous, lovely person on planet Earth, and he's trusted me with some incredible race bikes. I've basically had the track at Cadwell to myself on a Paget's YZR 500. It was an ex-John Reynolds bike that had also raced at the TT, and once it was warmed up, he basically said, just go out there and enjoy yourself. And I nearly high-sided that coming through the gooseneck, proper out of the seat. By sheer luck, my bum landed back on the seat and I carried on, but I nearly got the full 500 experience. You know, I've ridden a McGuinness Fireblade that he rode at Macau back in 2003 or 4, which was one of the old ones, the 929s. And Anstey's RCV, his TT RCV around Cadwell. Yeah, sometimes we're given a lot of laps to really enjoy these race bikes, but sometimes there's very, very few. So yeah, you just get an absolute tiny little taste of the bikes. Honda as well, Honda Monteblanco, we've ridden some of their current BSB bikes and they let us out for quite a long time. They actually let you out on a road bike first, then a super stocker, then a super bike. so you can kind of see the progression. And then when the day's finished, you just go out on the road bike again and they just feel absolutely awful. They just feel soft. They feel like the brakes don't work. They feel like they've got no power. Even a super stock bike is a massive step from a road bike, and then the super bikes and a massive step again. But then the irony with the super bike is that they're less of an animal than the super stocker because of the way they're just mapped to perfection. They're a lot lighter. They've got better brakes. They've got more grip. So it's really interesting riding the race bikes. I really miss it. We don't get to ride them too often, but I still managed to get my rocks off on my own bike, which is good. So thanks very much for the question. Next, keep the videos coming easy. This is from Matt Dillon. Thanks for your question. It's great to get more candid conversational style content from a journalist we've always known for so long. By the way, I'm in love with your Harada replica. There it is. Any special story behind it? Have you ever worn it, or has it always been a display? You've been wearing your custom painting buttons for as long as I've been around. Well, yeah, that Harada lid, I lusted after that in, I suppose, 92 or 3 when Harada was racing. And it was just, you know, back then there was no internet, and you just used to catch glimpses of you know, riding kit like this. And even some of the magazines and MCM wasn't full colour back then. So I remember seeing the Harada lid. But it was at a time where only the racers had the RX-7s with the scoops in their lids. You couldn't, customers, you know, the public couldn't buy them. And I remember when the Harada lid came out, I went to the Ali Pali bike show and bought it. I had an RGV 250 at the time, and I was racing an FZR 600 on the track. And I used to wear it on my RGV. But I was a little bit disappointed that it was I think it was what is it? A Quantum. It's a lovely, lovely lid. But it hasn't got the scoops. I was really disappointed it didn't have the scoops. I'd love to have one of these with the scoops. So I had this on my RGV when I crashed in '94. A car pulled out in front of me, had a massive accident, broke my legs really badly, compound fractures in my tib and fib, femur, wrist, nerve damage, knees, bone grafts, skin grafts, 9 operations, touch and go whether I even kept my legs. But I smashed my crash helmet up as well. Car pulled out on me and I went into the side of it. And that was a write-off. But while I was kind of recovering, I got another one, which was this one, because I thought I was going to be able to ride again. And I had drop foot after my accident, and I didn't ride from 94 to 2000. So I ended up never wearing it. Well, I did actually. I ended up wearing it a little bit in 2000, 2001. And then I got that Harada replica there, which does have the scoops on. I was well chuffed. And then in 2002, I got the job in MCM. And then soon after, I got the Rich Art to paint me this crash helmet. And that's the design I've had ever since. But I am partial to Harada replica, an original Schwantz replica. What else? Yeah, I'd say, and a Duan. There's a Duan up there as well. Yeah, a bit rambly, wasn't it? Anyway, I could talk all day about crash helmets. I love them. But yeah, I love the Harada lid, and Harada was really special, wasn't he, when he burst onto the scene in 250s on his Yamaha and won a championship. So thanks very much for the question, Matt. It's a little walk down memory lane for me. Right, James McDonald, these videos are brilliant. Thanks, mate. How do I get questions answered? Well, you've just done it. Thanks in advance. Yeah, basically just comment under any one of my videos, and I harvest them all, put them in a file, and then choose a bunch for the videos. I normally go one from the top, one from the bottom, one from the middle, and 2 or 3 more. But I've got a big old stash, so there's loads of great questions that are still to come. So yeah, you're going to have to send me another question now. Thanks very much. Right, this is from Neville Zammit. Hello Neville. Loving the videos. I'm 51 and I've been riding for over 30 years now. What I look for in a bike has changed a lot over the years, partly because everything hurts more when you're older. Yep. So sports bikes aren't really as appealing as they used to be, and also because the choice of bikes now is so ridiculous. It's a lot easier to find something that fits your needs. I agree. So here are my questions. As you've gotten older, do you feel like your tastes have changed? And if so, how do you feel this has affected how you approach bike tests? Well, Neville, you're right. I think you're 51, I'm 53. I think the average age of a reader now, like MCN, I think, would be about 57. So we're all getting older, and that kind of explains why sports bikes aren't as popular as they were, because it's hard to fit on them, and also because there's so much choice of other great bikes now. You don't have to have a sports bike anymore. So, you know, that's something we've spoken about in the past. I think the golden bullet would be to have a bigger sports bike, like a supersize R1 or a supersize Blade. That would be amazing. So yeah, my tastes have changed. And when I first joined MCN, I didn't want to look at anything other than a sports bike. I didn't want to wear anything other than leathers. But over the years, my tastes have changed. I said it here a million times, I love a maxi scooter. I've just finished living with a Triumph Tiger. I love that. It's just an amazing bike that does everything. I really, really like Super Nakeds. You know, Tuono is probably one of my favourite bikes. I like a lot of the retros. I like the Ducati Scramblers. I like the XSRs, the Fantics, the Triumphs. So yeah, I think I changed. My tastes have got a lot more eclectic, as have my friends, my close friends, and my brother, who I ride with a lot. They've all got sports bikes still, but hardly ever ride them. They've all got things like Multistradas and KTM Super Dukes and everything like that. So yeah, my tastes have definitely changed. Has it affected how I approach bike tests? No, because when you test a bike, you've basically got to think of the person you're writing it for, or you're talking to. So if you're testing a sports bike, you can kind of mention in dispatches that it's not very comfortable, but that's kind of a given. But you can't really mark it down for that. You talk about its performance, because the person buying a new R1 is probably going to be taking that to Spain and doing a load of track days, or, you know, UK doing a load of track days. So you need to focus on performance and braking power and electronics and all that kind of stuff. Conversely, if you're testing a cruiser, then you can talk about how it handles and how it brakes and how it goes, but you need to think more about how easy it is to ride, what equipment it's got, you know, the engine character rather than engine performance. If you've got a touring bike or an adventure bike, you speak about its performance, but you also talk about the comfort and its equipment and the toys and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't really affect our approach test, and the bikes we test aren't always your favourite bikes. The winner of a particular group test isn't normally your own personal favourite, but you kind of, you know, you look at how the bikes perform and you think, right, on balance, this one's better than that one for the person that's going to be using it. That's what we try and do anyway. I mean, around all of that, all the bikes that we test are exciting anyway. You know, whether it's a Harley or a scooter or a MotoGP bike, motorbikes are fun. I think we're perpetually amazed that motorbikes manage to stay up on two wheels and don't fall over. And they just give you freedom and excitement and enjoyment. Yeah, so it doesn't matter what it is, they're good fun. But when you're testing, you're thinking of the person that's going to be reading the test. But no, it's a great question. Thank you very much. And finally, from David Wilson. Thanks very much for the question. Great mix of questions. As a TT approaches, just wondered if you ever taken part. I think the brutality still makes it number one. Never raced or even been around a track, but feel more connected to it And 6 laps of 37 miles on those roads just seems like the limit of what's humanly possible. Concentration, rider skill and endurance are just incredible. Well, yeah, I agree. I tip my hat to anybody who's done the TT or the Manx or any road race. It's they're a special breed, and the riders that are really successful at it, they're just incredible. They're just incredible human beings. I've never raced a TT. I've always grown up loving road racing and Grand Prix. TT was never really on my radar. Maybe it's a north-south thing. There isn't many successful southern TT racers because you're kind of just further away from it. Well, you were when I was growing up anyway. You know, there's a lot more coverage on TV and social media now anyway. You can get a little bit more engaged with it. So I've never done it. I've thought about it a few times. A lot of other journalists have raced a TT, from Mark Forsyth to Chris Moss to Adam Child, Chad, who I used to work with, Alistair Fagan. A lot of journalists have done them, but I like the idea of it. I actually did a parade lap in 2011 where I did on closed roads. I was riding Guy Martin's super stock Relentless Suzuki, and I was on track or ran the course with Mick Doohan, Ian Hutchinson, Cal Crutchlow, Josh Brooks, who else? Nicky Hayden, God rest his soul, for a parade lap. And the likes of Crutchlow and Brooks and Hutchinson just absolutely flew off. They knew where they were going, obviously. Crutchlow lives there. Brooks was doing his kind of recceing at the time. So they disappeared off, and I was left with Doohan and Hayden, who literally treated it like a slow waving lap. And in those instances, you kind of think to yourself, what am I doing here? You know, you've got ultimate imposter syndrome. So I didn't stick around with them for very long. I didn't want to be kind of waving with them, because people would have thought, who the flipping hell's that? Even the TT course commentator, they're interviewing the riders, and when they came to me, he said, sorry, I don't know who you are. So, had to make someone feel really small. But anyway, I just decided to go off on my own. So I was between the Crutchlows and the Doohans, just riding my own riding my own ride, just treating it like a fast road ride, really, with this amazing motorbike, which was just amazing. And started to get into it. The hardest thing is using all the road and having the confidence to go through right-handers, blind right-handers on a racing line, because you know nothing's going to be coming the other way, or you'd hope so. And I thought, this is amazing, and I had an absolute amazing time. I didn't have any scares, went quite fast, but then it would be a whole different kettle of fish if you had a stopwatch on you and you had expectation on you and you'd committed to do it. I think you should only do road racing if you've always wanted to do it, if you've got a massive passion, because I just think you need to be 100% committed. You can't just play at something like that. So I've never done it. I wish I had when I was younger. I always kind of dreamt I'd love to do it on something like a GSX-R 750 or something. I think that'd be perfect. But yeah, I've got great admiration for anyone who's done it, and yeah, that parade lap I did sticks with me. Is one of the best things I've done on a motorbike, really, and to do it with those legends, even if I only saw them for a little while, so I didn't want to be near them, and I couldn't keep up with the fast ones anyway. That was just brilliant. And it was weird. I just gave the bike back to the Relentless team, disappeared off into the crowd. It was quite surreal, actually. And then we wrote about it for an MCM feature. But yeah, that was something very, very special. But that is a great question, David. But that is it for this video. Thanks very much for all your questions. I really look forward to receiving more. I really love doing them. I think the next video I'm going to do will be another blast from the past, looking at a bike in MCN that we all know and love. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon.